Welcome everybody, this is Jkob for PokerPro, and today I have a huge honor to have this special guest, an Italian poker player, Francesco Candelari. Hey Francesco, how are you?
Good, very good.
I see you're enjoying the sunshine.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, so the reason we are doing this interview is basically there are many reasons, but one of them is definitely because you have an interesting start to your poker career that I would like to mention. And the second of all is obviously that you are participating in the GG World Series of Poker Circuit at the moment, the ongoing series on GG Network. You're being sponsored by BetKings. You're doing a lot of funny stuff next to it, like Twitch channel with Maria, which we will touch in the later on. And I would definitely like to kind of get your impressions on that one. But to start things off, I guess the word is yours. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have an interesting story because I started poker only in September 2018. It was a little bit unexpected. I started for fun at the beginning. I always thought it was a game that I liked, but I never played beside a few amateur games with my friends. And then I started at the beginning. It was probably normal. I was mainly losing, but I was playing in mainly cash game at the beginning, not very expensive cash game. But then as I am a competitive person, I decided that, well, I mean, I think I have the potential to do better. So let me try to learn a little bit. I found a coach or a mentor. I started to watch lots of videos. I started to follow those PokerPro. I mean, those that are considered the top rags.
Yeah.
And I started to read books. I started to study the maths, so all the mathematical side of poker. And I thought I could apply the psychological side of poker, which I had. I come from international relations, and in international relations, what you have a lot is meta communication, right? So people say one thing, but in fact they mean something else. Whenever you hear something, and not only when you hear something, but when you see a way, a behavior, an action, a small detail, you have to understand what it means in the overall context of that situation. And I think in poker, even though it's a completely different situation, you're not in international relations, but in a way you are, because there are international people, right, all the time. No, I mean, you have to understand, okay, that small detail, what does it mean in that situation? Can I use it to my advantage in the game or not? And that's how I started. I started to win, in fact, mainly in tournaments. And then I started to play more and more. And yes, and 2019, at least according to the pros, was a pretty good year for me.
Okay, so basically to recap, you're not playing poker seriously for even 2 years now. It's less than 2 years, right?
Yes, seriously, it was January 2019.
Okay, and you had no background in poker prior to that, as you said, just some
zero
funny games with your friends, right?
Yes, as I said, from September 2018 to January 2019, I was playing amateur, mainly cash game. When I started with tournaments, the first big tournament was in Rosvadov last year at the end of January, and I got 4th place.
That was the Colossus, right?
No, this was it was called the Spanish Poker Festival.
Okay, yeah. There are so many. There are so many already.
Yeah, there are so many.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear, like, this is something we haven't touched before, you having a background in international relations. And I also studied similar thing, and I can see how this can be applied to poker, because there is a lot more than just like words and talking, right? There are like facial expressions, gestures, and everything to help you kind of identify if somebody's speaking the truth or like being honest. And this is probably one of the most important skills, I would say, at live poker, right? And
absolutely,
having experiences that can just be a great like bonus, right?
Yes, and also I would say your social skills. In fact, sometimes people think that a poker player, since he's someone that spends lots of time on the poker table or maybe plays a lot online, is a little bit not really a social person,
antisocial
right?
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, antisocial. But in fact, I would say that a successful poker player is exactly the opposite, because you really need to be good at understanding other people. So you need to be social. You need to be understanding of what does it mean exactly. And I would say it's not only live tells, but also the attitude of a player. Sometimes you have a player that is fearful. So you know that if you make a certain action, he might fold a certain hand because he's not confident, right?
Yeah.
Or so you need to understand situations, right? And what is interesting is that, I don't know, you sit at a poker tournament for 10 hours in a tournament, and you have so many situations, and so your intelligence, if you want social intelligence to understand the situation, might make the difference.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement, and I completely agree. And I think this is one thing that even makes poker so exciting, right? It's not just a game of cards. There's so much more involved. Obviously, there is skill. There is like a lot of information to be kind of learned. But at the same time, there is actually social skills, as you mentioned, reading people. And even in online poker, you have a lot of other things that kind of come in handy when you are a poker player. Speaking of which, you are predominantly a live poker player, if I understood you correctly.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay. Now, I mean, obviously, we want to touch the current situation with the coronavirus, COVID-19. It kind of changed how things are done around the world, like dramatically. And I would assume that for a live poker player, it's pretty much the same.
Yes, it's a tough time, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's a tough time because, unfortunately, what we have come to realize, I mean, to be very honest, is that poker rooms might be one of the best places where a virus can spread.
Yeah.
Because you stay lots of time with the same people in the same room, and you touch the same objects all the time. And those objects pass from one player to the other, namely the chips, right?
Yeah.
So,
and cards, right?
Yeah, and chips and cards. And so basically, of course, I mean, your exposure is high. So right now I'm living in Minsk, in Belarus. In Belarus, there are still some casinos that are open, and you could go there if you want, but I don't for this reason, because I think it would be unsafe from my side to do it. So of course you have to adapt to the online. Online is different. It's very different. And I would say it's different both because there are certain things that you cannot use. So all the situations, the social situations that I mentioned before, they are not, it's not possible to use them online. There are other things that you can use. Of course, there is more technical side of the of poker, but there is also something, I mean, people are less afraid to play certain hands. I see that online poker is way more aggressive than live poker. There are certain hands that I see when they open cards and I say, nobody would ever play live. But not only because I think there is really a psychological dynamic. There are certain people would be ashamed to open those cards in a live tournament, but they are not ashamed to do it.
I mean,
online, right?
when you're playing at home in your shorts, nobody sees you, right?
Exactly. They don't know who you are. Who cares?
Exactly. And I mean, obviously you can play more tables at once, right? So maybe your tournament life is not as valuable. Maybe if you have like 10 tournaments at the same time, you're probably maybe less protective of that, even though that is not the mentality you should have. Probably does affect how some people play, right?
Yes, that's absolutely true. That's not something that I was able to adapt yet. So I still play only one, maximum 2 tournaments at a time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because I still want to, even though the dynamics are different, I still try to maximize my understanding of that table, of how players are playing certain hands. And if I play, and of course, if you play 6 or 12 tables, how can you understand one? You have no idea of what that player is actually doing on that table. I mean, you almost play like a robot. I mean, and if you are a good robot, okay, maybe you are still successful, but it's still a robot. And I also play for fun and to enjoy it. And if I'm a robot, I don't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I guess just finding a balance, right? But I can see the point that you're making here. Having 10 tables, you cannot observe opponents, right? You're just basically
Right.
looking at your cards. It's even hard to spot dynamics. So you're just basically like kind of cutting yourself out for all that information, additional information that you could have on the players.
Right. Sometimes, I have to say, no, I mean, of course, everyone speaks about PO Solver and how PO Solver influences the game and all these softwares. And sometimes I think I've studied a little bit PO Solver, but I didn't find myself in it. And one of the reasons was, okay, when PO Solver says you have to raise 40% of the time, fold 20%, and 3-bet another 40%, right?
Yeah.
And I always think, okay, my decision is not based on a balanced game. It's only based on what I see there. So I'm a situational player. But if I don't see the situation, then of course, I mean, those programs come into the picture, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you're not an expert at those programs, then obviously you focus on what you are an expert on, right?
Exactly.
Great.